Most people think they are stuck because they lack motivation, or maybe they lack discipline, or maybe their right strategy just hasn't found them yet. But what if the real reason runs much deeper than that? What if the belief that you are not enough has been quietly running in the background of every decision, every hesitation, every moment you could not seem to move forward? Today, we are going to the root of this issue. This was the topic that was most voted for on my social media feeds, particularly those who follow me on Instagram and Facebook. And so today we are talking about getting unstuck from a psychospiritual approach so that we can break free and move forward. So what is keeping you stuck? Why maybe is your nervous system part of the issue? There's kind of this myth out there of being stuck, and it seems to be centered around what I would call a misdiagnosis of the issue, right? All those reasons that I outlined in the beginning of the episode. But being stuck is not a character flaw like those issues would outline for people. It's not. It's really a signal. When we feel stuck in some area of our lives, particularly in our relationships or in our businesses or in our leadership roles, it is a signal trying to tell us something. And most people spend years trying to think their way out of a place that they can only feel their way through. The real culprits behind that feeling of stuckness that we have all experienced is unprocessed emotion, for one. Right? It is stored in the body and it gets interpreted often as inertia. Identity conflict between the version of you that wants to move forward, you have a desire to move forward, and the version of you that is protecting you from the unknown. And then there's the nervous system, which has patterns, and the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn effects. And our bodies have learned how to survive using the nervous system patterns. Your nervous system scans a room or scans an environment for safety, even when your mind is not paying attention to that, or when it seems that your mind is not paying attention to that. And your nervous system will be at very inopportune times sometimes holding you back from the very goals that you verbally say and even mentally say you want to achieve. And that's not necessarily failure. That's not even self-sabotage, really. That is really about protection. And then there are the stories that we have all inherited from our childhoods. These are the stories passed down from the adults in our lives who were either our guardians and family members or parents, from the school system, our religious communities, and then our community at large. Those stories are inherited, and we oftentimes don't go in and do the inner work to assess if those stories are even ours to hold on to. No one chooses those stories, but we all carry them. Here is what most people miss, and I've seen it in myself, and I've seen it in the clients that I've worked with over the years, that underneath that stuck feeling, there is almost always a belief, a quiet and persistent and deeply held belief that says, you are not quite enough. This is the belief. You are not quite enough. You're not enough to have what you want. You're not enough to achieve what you want. Sometimes the voice in our head is even more direct and says something like, who do you think you are to want that? It's this feeling of, I'm not quite ready, or I'm not quite worthy. And that belief did not come out of the blue or from nowhere. It definitely comes from somewhere in your nervous system, where your nervous system learned a long time ago, before you had words to question it, that it needed to keep you safe from certain environment or experiences. But being stuck is not a destination. It is simply a conversation in your inner world that is trying to say something to you. It wants you to pay attention. And often that inner conversation begins with the word enough. So the root underneath this stuckness, this thing that is actually holding you back from achieving the things that you want to achieve, there are 3 roots, in fact. And these 3 roots run underneath that feeling of stuckness. They are deeply connected to each other. And so you may find one or all of these are part of your experience when you say when you acknowledge or say out loud that you feel stuck. First is the belief root, the belief systems, right? The subconscious stories that run underneath your conscious desires. I am not enough. It is not safe for me to be seen. People like me don't get to have that. That one was mine. I grew up in, I wouldn't say poverty necessarily, but we were definitely on the lower income scale. There were moments when we had food scarcity. There were moments when heat or lights were turned off. There were a couple of times that as a family, we were evicted from where we were living. And I was keenly aware of this. I don't think I was ever a kid who was oblivious. I wish I was, but I was keenly aware of what was going on. And as I grew eventually into adulthood, that sense that we as a family did not have enough stayed with me. And as an adult, I began to really take that in and have this sense that I didn't have enough. Eventually, I was not enough to achieve what I could see other people achieving around me. And that thought process carried me all the way into my more advanced years of adulthood, to the point where I started my private practice as a therapist and never really saw it as a business until I was 10 years in. I've been a therapist now for 23 years, but that first 10 years, I didn't see it as a business. I just saw it as some way for me to make extra money on the side of my full-time job. I did not see myself as a business owner, an entrepreneur, until I was a decade in. But that's a mindset thing. right? And so these are not truths. They are inherited stories and programs, and oftentimes based on experiences that we've had in childhood and into especially our young adulthood. And for many of us, particularly those who grew up in environments of material scarcity, emotional instability, maybe even chronic stress, the nervous system downloaded these programs before we were even old enough to question them, right? It's a protective mechanism that is built into who we are. And the child's world is the family system. That is the first world. And when the system is in lack, a child internalizes that lack as a felt sense of self. It has a chosen belief as a somatic imprint on who we are. And that imprint follows us through our childhood into adulthood, into our relationships, into our businesses, and every moment that we stand at the edge of something bigger. The second root is the body. The nervous system is our memory system. If expansion and visibility or success was once paired with pain, rejection, or danger, the body will resist moving toward it even when the mind says it wants it. Danger could be as simple as, in my life experience, if I spend too much, if I get the more expensive thing that I want, or the house rather than the apartment, then I may go broke. Because I am a person who knows scarcity, and it can come around the corner at any time. So I've got to play small in my wants, desires for my life, for my business, for my exposure in the world, so that I can keep myself safe. Does that sound familiar to you? Now, know that this is not weakness, right? This is your nervous system protecting you. So the desire to want something more feels scary. I know it did for me. I lived most of my adult life in small rental apartments. And it was during the pandemic, 2020, where I was in a small condo apartment. It was mine. I had bought it. But I realized I was not fully happy there. I had noisy neighbors, a whole myriad of things. I didn't have an outside space, which would have been important in the pandemic, a couple of other things. And I had to do the mental work, the mental jumping through hoops to allow myself to want, to desire a house, a home to live in. I finally got there. But man, that was a lot of work. The body learned that staying small was safety, and it had been keeping an agreement that it made with your body, your mind, your heart, maybe even your soul, ever since. And even when you no longer needed it, you still engaged in that. The third root is identity. The identity root. You cannot consistently create a life that you truly want and desire that does not match your identity. If your internal self-image or your internal self-concept is still the person that struggled or who stayed small in order to stay safe, the person who was never quite enough, you will unconsciously self-sabotage every attempt that you move to make good on your desires, good on what it is that you want. You will not find that you move forward, or forward movement is super slow and incremental. And of course, that's not on purpose. But because the identity has not caught up yet with the truth of who you are, this is where you would find yourself. And we describe that feeling as stuckness. So the problem is not about strategy, it's a root problem. And the deepest root of all is the belief that you were born not enough. That is the lie that we are dismantling today. Now, I always say to folks, the path is through. It's not around, right? We can't make this about spiritual bypassing. We cannot glaze or gloss over this. This is something you have to work through. I have worked through with clients to help them work through it. I have done this work for myself to basically shift my beliefs, step into a new identity, allow my nervous system to catch up with my desires. So the path is through. And what does it actually look like to move through stuckness rather than forcing your way past it? Well, it takes awareness. I think that we all have some level of awareness as to what's going on, maybe what has led from our past to this present moment to get us here. And so it starts with awareness, but it also has to then move through to system regulation and then integrating what you then have come to understand and then embodiment. So I call this my awareness, regulation, integration, and embodiment model. And it is a map. It is the map. Awareness starts with naming what is real, what belief, emotion, or pattern within yourself that is at the center of you feeling stuck. You've got to name it. Where did it come from? What was it trying to protect you from? Those are the questions you got to ask yourself. And then regulation of the body means you have to begin to feel safe enough to move forward. You can't access a new identity from a dysregulated nervous system. The work of regulation is the work of creating enough safety within yourself that expansion, moving forward, stepping into your vision of your future is no longer feeling like a threat. When our vision feels too big, when our vision feels like, oh my goodness, that's not me. When our desires feel like I can't possibly, ... That's when you know your nervous system has been activated. And it is putting on the brakes. It is digging its heels in and It's going to employ every way for you to not move forward. Sometimes all the way to illness. Other times, sabotage of your schedule, not being able to focus, distractions, interruptions, things that happen that you put aside what it is that you're working on and focus on something else that will not move the needle towards your goal. And then the next thing you know, you're a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, still, you have not moved forward. So that is something to think about. Have you felt like you've been there? Have you felt like you had a goal, you had your vision, you had your desire, and you were ready to move forward, and then you realize 6 months down the line, you haven't moved forward at all? If that's been your experience, then this definitely is something for you to then work on, regulating your nervous system. And we'll talk about one practice that I even recently created for this particular thing, because our growth process is not one and done. There are layers to this. And every time we step forward closer and closer to our vision or create a new vision for ourselves, we find there's another little layer that we need to peel back and examine. Another little corner that the light needs to be turned on to so that we can assess what's there and then make some shifts. The next is the integration of the story that we have to rewrite. You've got to look back and have the awareness and then regulate your nervous system. But you then have to look at the story or stories that you've been carrying that were not yours to begin with and rewrite them. Not suppress the old ones. You've got to consciously let go of the old narrative and rewrite your story. And this is where meaning making happens. We are meaning making creatures. And where you begin to understand that the scarcity you once experienced, or whether the material or emotional or spiritual scarcity that was there in your life, was not evidence of your worth. It was simply a condition of your environment. And you gotta know, conditions change. Conditions can change, and conditions will change if you can hold your vision and move into it. The next thing is embodiment. So once you have that rewritten story and you take your desire and turn that into a vision for your life that you truly want to move forward towards or step into, because that is your new identity, you practice embodying, being that new version of yourself before evidence is shown, right? That is the identity shift. You cannot envision the life for yourself and not also hold the new version of yourself, and from there, not have the thoughts, the new beliefs, the new actions to go with it. And so when you rewrite your story, you create a new vision. And when you create a new vision, you create a new identity. And in doing so, you then have to embody that new identity It's almost like practicing, right? Who you now want to be in the world. And in doing so, you're inhabiting that new version of yourself, even before all of it shows up in your day-to-day 3D reality. For some people, this is incremental. For other people, they have quantum leaps. And it's all going to be about how well you step into your new vision, your new reality, your new identity. It all depends on that. Are you going to continue to slide back into old familiar habits and patterns of your nervous system? Or are you going to continue to give your nervous system evidence of what really and truly is in this moment that counters what it believes from your childhood or your young adulthood? Know that your identity leads, not results, not what we see in our 3D, but your identity is what leads. And your identity is based on the vision that you hold for yourself. And so when you live from your vision, like Neville Goddard says, when you live from your vision, it cannot help but materialize into the results that you see in your 3D reality. The version of you who is enough does not wait to feel enough before they move. You move and you let the feeling catch up with you. The path through is not linear. Trust me, this is not a straight line. There are going to be moments you have to pause and again, peel back those onion layers. It is layered. And every layer that you move through makes the next one more possible. When I look back at my own life, and I can remember a couple of clients that I've worked with who grew up in similar circumstances, when you start to see your vision unfold in your 3D reality, you catch yourself and realize, oh my goodness, I can do hard things. I was speaking to someone recently, and I tell you, being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, a conscious business owner, has been the hardest but most rewarding work I have ever done. It has shaped me and stretched me and caused me to grow in ways that I could not 15 years ago ever imagine, even 10 years ago ever imagined. But I keep showing up and keep stepping into my new vision and keep moving forward. So what is your next move here? What is the one thing that you can do today to begin to shift out of stuckness and feel the energy moving towards your vision? I want to give you 2 different practices to take with you from this episode. The first is for your mind, and the second is for your body, for your nervous system. So the 3 questions practice. This is for when you feel stuck and you catch it and you pause in the moment and you ask yourself these 3 questions. What am I feeling in my body right now when I think about what I want, what I truly want, and what story is underneath that feeling? And what would the version of me who already knows they are enough do differently here? So those are your 3 questions to think about, to sit with, to journal with. And then for the body, for the nervous system, this has become my favorite practice of late. And I call it the enoughness practice. Once a day, and usually at the end of my day, but once a day, find a quiet moment to pause and think about your day and see where there was something that was provided for you, right? Where you felt held or seen, where enough or even more than enough showed up, even in a quiet way. A meal that nourished you, or even a meal that was provided for you. And now let me preface that one, because there have been times I've gone out to lunch or dinner with a friend and be fully ready to pay for my meal, and that friend will say, "Oh no, I've got it." And it used to be when I was younger, "No, no, 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 that's okay." And I realized I was then holding them back from the joy of giving, but also stepping into that feeling of not enoughness, right? So think about those moments. Think about the conversations that you may have had that day that felt uplifting or safe, or maybe a moment where the universe met you, where the universe provided for you in a way that you had not expected. And then just sit with that. Sit with that knowing, sit with the feeling in your body. Let it register in your nervous system as you take a breath into it. Breathe into it. Let your body feel what it means to be someone that the universe provides for. You are not trying to convince yourself of anything. You are simply giving your nervous system new data, new information consistently until enoughness becomes the default frequency rather than the exception. Because here's what I know. The abundance you are trying to move towards is not waiting to be created. It is waiting for you to recognize it. And the life you want is not out of reach because you're not enough. It's waiting because part of you has not yet remembered that you always were enough. You were not born into lack. You were born enough. And before scarcity touched you, and before the stories were written, and before the world told you otherwise, you were enough. And that is where your next chapter actually begins. So I would love to hear from any of you who have watched or listened to this episode. If it opened up something for you, if it opened up something within you, I want to go deeper with you. I am hosting, as promised, a free live masterclass on this very subject, Getting Unstuck, a psychospiritual approach to breaking free. And that masterclass is going to be on Thursday, July 16th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And it'll be about a 60-minute masterclass. And we're going to go beyond what we've discussed in this podcast and into real shifts and real transformation. There will be a live somatic practice and an identity rewrite experience. A clear, embodied path forward is what I desire for you all to leave with that day. The link to the registration is in my bio as well as in the show notes. So I encourage you to sign up and to come ready to do the work that is necessary to help you get unstuck. I will see you there and continue to do the inner work that helps to lead you to your vision. Thanks for watching. If you are ready to move beyond survival into greater alignment, greater clarity, and transformation, I'd love to support you. An alignment call is where that journey begins. Take a moment, click the link in the show notes, and schedule your alignment call with me, and let's explore what's possible for you together.